Welcome to the Decent Crypto Podcast. Today is Wednesday, November 15th. We are live from New York City with our latest Decent Deep Dive on Proof of Reserves. Matt, this is very topical right now. How you doing?
I'm still reeling, man. I'm still I'm still sad about FTX, sad for everyone impacted, and that's really what leads us into this topic is whether proof of reserves can help us feel a little bit safer on centralized exchanges.
Yeah, this has been everybody is calling for proof of reserves right now. This is the talk of the town. Let's talk about what this is. What is proof of reserves exactly, and why does this exist?
Yeah, first we should probably tackle why does this exist, right?
Yes.
So no question too dumb for our audience. What happens when you send your keys to a centralized exchange? Or sorry, when you send your crypto to a centralized exchange.
When you send your crypto, right?
Yeah.
So
like what transactions happen? Like, okay, so you click receive, let's say Bitcoin, right?
Right.
In on the like Coinbase interface, right? And
yeah, let's say you log into FTX and you wanna receive some Bitcoin so that you can trade with it or do whatever with it, right? If you're receiving crypto, you generally are going to either trade it or sell it, sell it for USD, trade it for another crypto, or trade it and then like bridge it out or do whatever, right? But
yeah, I mean, a lot of people hold their crypto on centralized exchanges, right?
Sure.
There's a risk reward, right? Like maybe for some people it's safer to have it on a centralized exchange, or it's perceived safer than trying to like self custody, right? There's all sorts of reasons you might need to receive crypto to a centralized exchange. So say you want to like receive a little bit of Bitcoin on your Coinbase account. You open up the Coinbase.com website, you click deposit and withdraw, you click deposit, you select Bitcoin, and then it generates an address for you. And it says you should send your Bitcoin to this address. And so you fire up your hardware wallet or whatever, you send your Bitcoin to that address. Then what happens?
Then your hardware wallet connects to the nearest node on the blockchain, and it tells that node, hey, I've signed this transaction that says I want to sign this amount of Bitcoin to this address specified here. Please relay this for me. And to do so, I will attach this amount of money as a transaction fee.
Right. And so it gets sent to the network. It gets put into a block. That block gets added to the chain. And then generally what happens is the address that gets generated for you on Coinbase.com is not where that Bitcoin's actually going to wind up. It's
or any exchange. Let's just talk about any exchange.
Yeah, let's talk about any exchange. So when you generate that address on your exchange, right, that's what's called a feeder address, right? And it's going to send your crypto to to another sort of bigger address that holds like a lot more crypto, right? So the reason you need to do this is to attribute however much crypto to your account on the centralized exchange.
So what's happening here is that the one that you copy pasted, right? Like let's say you went to kraken.com or binance.com or ftx.com or literally any exchange, and you say, I want to send this much Bitcoin to this address. The one that you copy paste into your hardware wallet, is that the feeder address, or is there like a feeder address that it's being sent to like on the network first that like collects all of the Bitcoin initially, and then the exchange manages how much gets sent to each wallet afterwards?
No, it's the first thing. The one that gets generated that you copy paste, that's the feeder address. And then that thing will turn around and send the crypto onward to the exchange like hot wallet.
Okay.
Okay.
And so the exchange hot wallet, like when you're interacting with it, right? Or like when you're trading on the exchange or anything like that, you're not actually moving the funds directly from that like feeder address that you copy pasted, right? Those funds are being traded on the exchange for you. And then when you want to withdraw again, they'll come from that feeder address back to whatever wallet you designate.
They go from the hot wallet to whatever address you designate. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're just breaking things down like mechanically here. So crypto comes into the exchange first to the feeder wallet, then to the hot wallet, then potentially to the cold wallet, right? But once it but that feeder address, that's yours, or that's like designated for your use so that the exchange knows how much crypto to credit you with. Okay.
Okay.
So, say you send 1 Bitcoin to this address, then it sends that 1 Bitcoin or a little bit less than 1 Bitcoin onward to the hot wallet, right? And then at that point, like the hot wallet contains funds from multiple people, right? So the exchange has this hot wallet or set of hot wallets, cold wallets, set of cold wallets that comprises its overall set of like customer deposits or assets, right? It also has internally a database that says, here's how these assets are split out, right? Because when an address has, 500 Bitcoin, it has 500 Bitcoin and they're fungible, right? It doesn't have like 1 Bitcoin, 1.7 Bitcoin, 3 Bitcoin, whatever, to represent the individual users like deposits, right? It's just like one commingled address, right? So that's sort of at the core of this, is that at this point you have to trust the exchange not to do something nefarious with the Bitcoin that you sent them.
Right.
Because
in the end, yeah. So your point in this whole thing is that when you send your funds to an exchange, it's not necessary, or at least you don't have any way of proving that they've just put a separate wallet just for you that has only your funds. You can't really see them on chain, right? There's no way for you to track on the blockchain that the funds that you sent directly to that wallet, like they only have your funds there, right? They're going to have a ton of random funds. Like if you even look on Etherscan or on any block explorer, there are tons of wallets labeled as like Coinbase 1, Coinbase 2, FTX 1, Binance 1. These are all tagged because these are these like big pooled kind of these are generally the hot wallets, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and so on the way out, like all the crypto comes out of the hot wallet and goes to the user wallet, right? And so on the way in, you need a feeder wallet to like verify that like the person that sent it actually is you and you get credited appropriately in your like exchange account. But on the way out, they just send it to you directly from the hot wallet that has all of these users' funds like commingled. And usually there's between 1 and 50 of them tagged on Etherscan at any given time.
Yeah. And so the point here being that you don't have complete direct visibility into your funds once they enter that specific exchange. It's kind of like a black box to you.
Yeah, there's always funds coming in and out of this hot wallet, right? So there's really no way of knowing like whether or not the assets and liabilities of the exchange match up one to one.
Yeah. So that is the core problem that we're talking about here, right? There's a custody, there's a kind of like custody issue here. There's a central point of attack, failure, trust. Whatever it is, trust. And that revolves around the custody of your crypto assets, right? Because it's a black box once you enter into it. Now this leads into what happened last week with FTX, which is that, they were doing some crazy reckless stuff, allegedly with customer funds. So how do we avoid this kind of thing in the future? How does this proof of reserves concept help us avoid these kinds of things in the future? And I guess even more fundamental, does it help us at all?
So I guess from a high level, the reason for proof of reserves is because you want to check that, it's fairly easy to check an exchange's assets, right, on their balance sheet. You can look at all of the hot and cold wallets that they have, add up the underlying assets, and prove that like they actually have those assets, right? That part's pretty straightforward. The part that's harder to know for sure is when you look at all of the customer liability, when you look at the exchange's liabilities, which is like if a customer wanted to withdraw funds from the exchange, could they?
Yeah.
That's a much harder thing to verify, right? Because it's all on an internal database.
Right.
So, you know, it's only as good as like an auditor is, right? Or in FTX's case, like, you know, there's allegations that there was some kind of software backdoor that if you asked it, what are the customer liabilities? It wouldn't include a lot of them,
I
right? And
see.
it would just give you as much as they actually had on deposit, right?
Okay. So let's
And
talk real
so,
quick. So first, before we get into liabilities part, let's talk about the proof of reserves piece exactly. Like mechanically, how does that proof of reserves work? Because there are a few exchanges that already have implemented this, like Binance, you know, put something out. Kraken has been doing this for many years. There are, I think, 7 or 8 exchanges that have been doing this for a long time. What exactly does this involve? And like, does this really, and then we'll get into your kind of your point about like, does this actually help us prove anything?
yeah. So, you know, you can imagine one really simple way of like proving, you know, so we can prove the assets, right? They're all on chain. That part's easy enough. Proving the liabilities is the hard part, right? And so you can imagine one way of doing it would be for an exchange to like dump out the contents of their centralized database directly onto the internet, right? But there's all sorts of privacy issues with that, right? And so you don't really want like your exchange to say Karan has 10 ether, Matt has 1 ether because he spent it all on NFTs. You know, like Alameda has 0 ether, right? You don't really want to have like that level of like information being dumped onto the public internet every day.
Right,
Right.
right.
And so what you could do instead is you could hash each of the pieces of information, right? So for each account on the exchange, you have the account number, you have every currency, and then the corresponding amount of that currency that's held, right? And then you have like some kind of timestamp or something, right?
Okay.
And you can take all of that info and just create a hash of each for each account, right? And then each customer can go in and say, they can go verify, okay, like when I take my account and I take the account number and I take, you know, each currency and the amount of each currency that's held and I hash it, does that hash exist in the list of hashes that got published
I see.
on the internet today? Now, this is where it gets interesting, or arguably interesting. Looking through a list of hashes is pretty computationally expensive, right? As the number of accounts grows on that centralized exchange, the amount of time that it takes to verify the presence of your hash in that list of hashes grows exponentially, right? And so what they, you know, what the exchange can do is they can they can put it in something that's called a Merkle tree, right? Which is a
Okay.
very efficient way of verifying the existence of data within some data structure. So
Okay.
here we need to verify the existence of the hash of your account and your account info and check that it's present within the publicly posted list of hashes.
Okay.
So what you do is you put you put the hashes into something that's called a Merkle tree. So imagine like the simplest kind of Merkle tree, right? We have 2 hashes, A and B, right? We take them, we hash the hashes to the what's called the root hash at the tree. So you have, you know, you can picture like it's like an upside down or it's like a pyramid structure, right? You
Yeah,
have
yeah,
you have A and B at the bottom, and they point up to C at the top, right?
yeah. Okay.
And C is called the Merkle root, right? So it's
Yeah.
the root of the tree, and everything else is called a leaf, right?
Okay.
So instead, what you can, and so I, you know, you can imagine as this grows, right? Like we have, say, like 4 accounts, right? We have A, B, C, and D. A and B hash to something else. C and D hash to another thing. You take those 2 things, they hash to the Merkle root, right?
Okay.
Um, So now any of the 4 people, A, B, C, or D, can look at this tree and say, do I see my, and usually the exchange will tell you, Karan, you're at, leaf B, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you look at leaf B, you verify that it matches your hash, right? And then you want to make sure though that the list isn't being tampered with, because
Okay.
maybe they're showing you a version that has your hash intact
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
has everyone else's hashes, and those things add up to like 100 Bitcoin or whatever, right? But maybe they don't actually have 100 Bitcoin. And so maybe when they show me my hash, it's in a version of the tree that would exist if like you had 0 Bitcoin, right? And so you want to make sure that there's no bait and switch going on, that every account on the exchange is able to go in and verify that like each of their balances are present on the same tree as everyone else's balances.
Okay, I
Right?
see. Yeah.
That there's been no tampering.
Okay. And only somebody who has all of that information, that private information for each account, that basically only the exchange would have, or the individual would have, or some kind of independent third party that's given access to all that information would have. Only those groups would be able to generate that hash and prove that it exists there, right?
Yeah, that's the idea. Somebody with
Okay.
full visibility, right?
Okay. Into the source data.
Yeah, into the source data in order to generate the hash of each account, and then the hash of each of the hashes all the way up to the root of the Merkle tree.
Okay.
So when we look at this tree, right, you can verify that your leaf is present in a tree that has the root X, right? And then I can verify that my leaf is present in a tree that has the root X. And if they were bait and switching at all, like say presenting you with one version of the tree and presenting me with another in order to like cover up for any like shortfall, our X's would be different, right? Because any tampering with any of the data in any of the leaves would lead you to a different Merkle root.
Okay. So that's the way it prevents like people from being presented different like versions of the same data, or like different versions of data basically.
Yeah, exactly. And so that allows you to say like, okay, if everybody on the exchange goes in and checks all of their accounts, and says, yes, in fact, my account is present here, and I see the Merkle root having X, then like if every single account were to do that, then you would know for sure that everyone's accounts were like accounted for in the creation of this tree. Right?
Yeah.
You know that you haven't been left out of the liabilities is basically the idea. So when
Okay.
they're tallying up who they owe crypto to and how much, you want to make sure that like you're being counted there. And everybody wants to do that. And this is a way to make sure that like not only is each individual being counted, but also like all of them are being counted on the same ledger. And so when you get to that grand total, everyone's been accounted for.
Okay, right. So then what would happen here is that each account's information gets passed through, hashed. All that is totaled up, right? They probably have, some kind of sum that represents all customer deposits, which are the liabilities of the company, at least for that part of the balance sheet. Then they take that and they match it to the on-chain assets that they have, and that proves that all customer deposits are at least backed 1-to-1. Is that kind of the idea there?
That's the idea there, but there's one extra like point of trust that I think makes a pretty big impact here.
Okay.
Which is that you need an auditor to go in and say, yes, in fact, all of the accounts have been accounted for, right? So you could imagine if there was a nefarious account that was working in cahoots with the exchange, right? They could say, hey, I have a claim on 100 Bitcoin, but don't include me in the liabilities. And the exchange could say, okay, I won't include you in the liabilities. And then there might be 100 Bitcoin shortfall, but no one would ever know because this account is not actually present there.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So you
need an auditor.
Yeah, that would open the door for some kind of collusion, basically. So if they were short, right, they could say to some of their biggest players, like, let's just not include these customer deposits as our liabilities, and we'll have some kind of side deal to not represent that, and that will let us, fly under the radar here.
Yeah, exactly. And so, the implication would be like nefarious in the terms of the nefarious deal, you have like nefarious customer working with nefarious exchange. Nefarious exchange says, "Hey, you can, you have 100 Bitcoin. We'll let you borrow 100 Bitcoin from the other customers, right? And then we just won't include your 100 Bitcoin on the list of liabilities at all."
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And then that way assets still match liabilities, even though the customer Bitcoin has been like transferred or borrowed or stolen by the nefarious party.
Okay, that makes sense. And actually, like on that point, why would the customer be incentivized to do that? They just like get paid on the side or something.
The exchange, yeah, maybe they get paid on the side. Maybe they're owned by the same person as the nefarious customer. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there could be some kind of side deal, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe it's like leverage, right? Where it's like, okay, we see that you have 100 Bitcoin, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll give you leverage. We'll let you borrow 100 Bitcoin against it, which you really shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
And then, we'll just hold it as collateral or whatever. Or if we like go into bankruptcy, no one will ever know that like you took 100 Bitcoin off without us debiting your account,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, that's one big issue, is that like you need a third party auditor to come in and say a couple of things. First, yes, in fact, all of the customer accounts are present in the data, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Second, when you take all of the customer accounts that are present in the data, their liabilities add up to this number, which is represented by this hash.
Yeah.
So you have some
Okay.
independent party, they come in, they hash all the accounts, and they say, yes, all the accounts are present. And when you include all of these accounts, the hash looks like this. And
Okay.
then every customer can go in and verify, okay, when I include, I can check that my account exists in a Merkle tree that has that hash.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's only as good as the auditor, really, if you think
Yeah.
about it.
Okay, that makes sense. So this is really not like that, that much of a like fail-proof solution, right? You could easily get an auditor that's, if there's one auditor that you need to, to be on your side, like I think that's going to be fair. Like, it didn't FTX apparently have their own auditors or something like that? Like they were allegedly audited. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
So is Enron, right?
yeah, it's true. So now, is there anything from like a mechanical, like technical perspective that still remains that to be discussed? Like the auditor needs to come in and go through and make sure all account information is included. They need to verify that this hash matches like the actual total number of liabilities. And then there is the process, like the process of actually verifying the assets you said is very simple because they're all on chain. Are there any like off chain assets, like, and then that would all be up to the auditor also to determine?
So on chain, like at least the way that Kraken does it, which I think is pretty good, is
Mm-hmm.
they will generate a signature for
Right.
each of the hot and cold wallets that they're using,
Mm-hmm.
and show it to the auditor and say, hey, um, like you can see that we verifiably have ownership of this account based on the signature that we just generated.
Mm-hmm.
That's important because Kraken could just point to any account, or an exchange could just point to any account that has 100 Bitcoin and say, yeah, that's mine, right? And so
Yeah.
what you really need is you need them to sign some message that can't be, duplicated, right? That shows like verifiably that they have ownership of that asset.
Mm. Yeah. Makes sense. Um, okay. So, and Kraken has been doing this for like since its inception, or for like almost a decade or something, for a long time. Like you can go
Wow.
back and check your proof of reserves going back. Like I remember they've been sending me these emails every single year since I remember being a client. Um, Okay, so now let's get into like some of the more big picture stuff. Like, do you think this actually makes a difference, right? Like with FTX, if they had been publishing proof of reserves this whole time, like, do you think there is a because the other idea behind proof of reserves is not only that the auditor, it all comes down to the auditor. If every single client, if every single user decides to verify this themselves, like they have the ability to do so. Like Kraken at least gives you the ability to verify that your funds are included, right? Or like your account information is included, right, in the Merkle tree. So like you can verify that yourself. Like so technically and it's very tough to get millions of users to actually do that, right? Which is why it does come down to the auditor. But theoretically, it could be done. So would that have helped anything in the FTX case?
Well, it would, I guess, limit the damage, right? So, if you think about a world where like every single person is verifying, right? Every single person check the proof of reserves, verifies that their account was included, then you know that there's at least that much in assets on the exchange, right? Like you know that the exchange actually does have that balance, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what you don't know is how many other fake balances on the liability side were like not included. So
Mm.
Alameda, for example, if we take the FTX story at face value, right? Alameda could borrow up to their balance worth of crypto,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right, without anyone noticing,
Right.
right?
Okay, okay. You're saying fake balances like stuff that's just not reported.
Yeah, and really that's like the issue here, right? Is that like imagine Coinbase issues you or Kraken or whoever sends you 1 ETH but doesn't debit your account on coinbase.com,
Mm.
right? And then you can just kind of keep withdrawing crypto while still holding claims on however much crypto,
Mm.
right? That's what it doesn't protect you against is
Okay, yeah.
effectively stealing,
Yeah.
right? Because maybe there's no way, like yeah, like it would limit the damage though, right, to the total amount of assets that the nefarious parties hold or
Mm.
like deposited, right? You have to have those assets somewhere. It's just a question of how they're getting split among the accounts within the internal database,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And,
Mm.
and so, the amount of total assets that you need to verifiably have on chain is equal to the amount that people are going to verify is present in the Merkle tree.
Mm. Okay.
So even in a world where every single customer on FTX verified that their information was present in that Merkle tree in the proof of reserves, like they could still have 50 cents on the dollar actually in there.
Mm. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. So there are certain things like that the company, just like business practice wise, that they could be doing, like not reporting certain things, including with certain users that would just not reflect. Um,
Yeah.
okay. So it does
And
come down to the auditor.
that assumes that the auditor is honest too,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
So it comes down to A, is the auditor getting shown everything? B, is the auditor honest with like because you have this Merkle tree and all it does is proves that like some hashes of some stuff go to some hash, right? What does that hash actually mean? You
Mm.
need the auditor to check that like when they check the total amount of liabilities that it matches that hash.
Mm. Okay.
So they
I
need to be
see.
counting like all of the accounts and they need to be not lying about what the hash is when they sum up all of the liabilities in those accounts,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Okay. So I guess it's a step, but it's not really a huge step.
No, it's really not a huge step. In fact, it's pretty measly.
Mm.
um,
Okay. So what is the solution here, Matt? What should our listeners do with their crypto? Not leave it
well,
on exchanges. What's the move here?
yeah, the move with centralized exchanges is to treat them like a bathroom, right? Like the public bathroom thing. I've been hearing this lately, and it really resonates.
What's the public bathroom thing? I've not heard this.
Wait, you haven't heard this? What
No.
do you do in a public bathroom, Karan?
Is it? It's maybe
Don't
a
answer
little
that
rude
question.
to
Don't
say.
answer that
You
question.
know? Yeah. I don't know. Avoid it. Like
You go in, you do your business, you get out. Right?
Okay. I think that's a normal bathroom. A public bathroom I avoid. I like it. And a centralized exchange is like a bathroom.
A centralized exchange is like a bathroom.
A Solana smart
business,
contract is like a public bathroom. You just avoid.
it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like self-custody is hard, right? And you know, that sucks. Like, look, self-custody is really hard in the traditional world, right? Self-custody in the traditional world involves cash under the mattress. It's dangerous. It's shitty. Pablo Escobar used to put cash in his walls, and like he had to write off like 5 to 10% losses a year due to mold and rats eating the cash. So look, it's not easy to self-custody dollars, right? It's easier to self-custody crypto at the very least, right?
It is. That's true.
You know, I think a lot of us were storing our assets on centralized entities in the last cycle because we were earning yield on them, right? We were earning like 6% annualized on our stable coins or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. That's not a good enough reason, right? Like if you need yield, you should be buying high yield bonds or like dividend paying stocks or real estate. You shouldn't be buying crypto to earn yield on your crypto. I understand everyone wants more ETH, everyone wants more Bitcoin. You should be staking your ETH, not depositing it into BlockFi, right? You should be self-custodying as much as humanly possible, I would say. Keep your money off of exchanges. Like it just doesn't make sense, right? You should also be using decentralized exchanges as much as possible, right? Like it's really incredible that Uniswap exists, right? And the pricing, like the slippage on Uniswap for like ETH/USDC is like very small.
It's very good.
You might want to, like you'll pay less fees on Uniswap a lot of times than you will on a centralized exchange. Use Uniswap. Right. Like there's a reason these things exist.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of even funds, that I know, like if they need loans, like they'll use smart contracts over centralized services. Even though it's not capital efficient, like they have a thesis on the crypto assets themselves. They want, they want to take a loan and they'll use a smart contract. They won't use another like OTC desk or anything like that. So,
I mean, I certainly feel safer doing that, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do I know that when I pay my loan back, I'm going to get my collateral back? There's no way to verify that, right? Like, at least with smart contracts, you can verify it.
So I think it's a tough situation for a lot of users, right? Like FTX was known as the one, right? Like it's a lot worse than Mt. Gox, right? Just because of the size now. I really think that proof of reserves, while it is a good step, I don't think it's a full solution. What I think is a full scale solution is like if we come to industry standards on like open auditing practices, like kind of come to a Schelling point, if you will, on like how this is done as an industry just across the board. I think if we can come to that, and a lot of exchanges start adopting this, I think we'll just get to a safer place, because like more so than regulation, I think like a social kind of coordination or a social like pressure almost, and social norms, I think become a lot more effective. I think in the long term, people are better protected as well.
It is a good point, right? Like if you introduce proof of reserves into every exchange's DNA, and you have people that are specialists in proof of reserves, and they are doing that because they believe that this open auditing is important, then you're going to wind up with a lot harder of a time like deceiving them,
Yeah.
right? Those people are going to notice if assets go missing,
Yeah,
right? And
exactly.
the more people you have touching that system and auditing it thoroughly, the more likely it is that any like wrongdoing gets caught. So, versus like in a system where you don't have proof of reserves as one of the like customs of that culture, it leaves the door a lot more open for misuse of customer assets.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
Like social enforcement, like is a lot more powerful than any kind of like government enforcement. Like we just saw this, right? Like the reason FTX was in the Bahamas is because they couldn't do all this kind of stuff in the US. And so, yeah, like, government enforcement can be gamed, but like social enforcement, like it's a lot harder in my opinion.
Yeah. Do
Yeah.
you think it goes against, or do you think it what am I trying to say here? Do you think that like the knee-jerk reaction, obviously, pull all your crypto off of exchanges, never keep it on a centralized exchange again? Do you think that that harms the overall like social pressure on exchanges to provide this data?
No, just because I think centralized exchanges provide such a massive service, right? Just purely fiat on ramps, right? Fiat on ramps and off ramps. Like, I just think it's such a massive service that they are going to have the biggest regulatory pressure. So I think that'll exist, but and I think that social pressure will also exist because people will always want to keep funds on centralized services. Like you said, self custody is very hard. But what's interesting about that is that like a lot of NFT people I've talked to, a lot of stuff I've seen is like they were much less affected by this FTX situation because they're like, yeah, I mean, like I own NFTs and I own ETH. And it's like, if I want to mint, if I want to do anything, if I want to like pay gas, if I want to like send stuff, like I just need ETH in my wallet. So I'm like, I'm always self-custodying. Like I don't send it to an exchange. Like I literally, like you said, I treat the exchange like a bathroom. I'm in and out. And so a lot of NFT folks that I know about are just completely unaffected. Whereas a lot of like degens and traders and even like, hedge funds are completely blown out. Super interesting.
That is
But
super interesting.
yeah, I know, right? The future is on chain. Anything else you want to hit on proof of reserves? I mean, I think it's a pretty interesting concept. I think we covered most of the important points. Like general takeaway is that it's a good step, but we need to do even more.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, well, yeah, I mean, I think there's another option here, right?
Mm,
So here's my hot take, okay?
mm,
Clearly there's demand in the system for leverage when it comes to crypto, right?
mm-hmm,
There's demand for leverage from market makers, there's demand for leverage from hedge funds, and leverage is something that has been provided without effective government oversight or regulations or public protections.
mm-hmm.
We don't get proof of reserves for fiat banks, right? Because they can't prove assets that meet their liabilities, right? Like it's a fractional reserve system,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah. The whole system is based on not being one-to-one backed.
yeah, and that's not an inefficient use of that's a more efficient use of capital to a degree, right? And for doxed parties that can adhere to like crypto banks risk parameters,
Mm-hmm.
like, and the key there is the risk parameters, right? Maybe it's okay to allow more banking style services to enter crypto,
Mm.
right? The issue here is that it's an exchange, it's not a bank,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Right.
Exchanges absolutely should be posting proof of reserves, but if we could have like an FDIC style guarantee up to 250 ETH, right, or like Bitcoin or
250
whatever,
ETH.
$250,000.
Yeah, that's
Well,
true.
okay.
I forget ETH is at 1K now. In my mind it's still at 4K.
I envy your mind.
Mm,
Yeah, I mean, if like if we had a little bit more customer protection, like customer protection can take a lot of forms, right? Like, isn't FDIC kind of a form of customer protection?
Well, I think it's a
right?
complete form of customer protection.
Yeah, and it's protecting you from the banks for making loans that would wipe out your assets,
Dude,
right?
didn't you see that? So I think it was like Kobe. I think Kobe proposed on Twitter. He was like, if Binance decides to bail out FTX, they should do something where they bail out every user up to 250K and then let everybody else go bust. That way it protects retail and lets everybody else go bust. I was like, that's genius. It's like FTC.
Yeah, it's like, wow, where'd you get that one?
Yeah, exactly. Pretty cheap customer acquisition for Binance. Actually, no, it's not. But anyways.
It depends on how big the hole is, right?
Okay, yeah. So I agree with you. Like, I think there's a reason that in traditional finance, like custodial whatever, like custodians, literally just custodians, brokerages, like execution, like all this stuff is split up, right? There are like 6 or 7 different layers of like groups that provide these different services in traditional finance. Like, I'm not a TradFi bro at all, so I don't know all 7, but I just
never. I am a TradFi bro. I just never pay attention.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have no idea either.
The point here is that in crypto, if you want, you can be basically all of them, right? You can interact with different smart contracts that lets you be the custodian, lets you execute, lets you trade, take loans, apply leverage, all this kind of stuff, right? You can do all of that just yourself. But if you're going to trust somebody else, it makes sense for all of those services to be split out, because this wheel has been invented, right? There's no reason for us to fully reinvent it, right? If we're doing this in a DeFi sense, in a decentralized world, like, great, smart contracts, right? Like, audit the smart contracts, let people do whatever they want with them, right? But if we're going back to centralized services providing, services that we've had for a long time, like, we should probably follow that playbook. Here I am, this fucking normie, arguing for regulation now. What have we become, Matt?
Look, to a degree, right? Like, isn't that the problem? Was that FTX was ostensibly segmenting it out, right? They were just a custodian or an exchange or whatever. And the problem was they dabbled with other stuff too.
They dabbled too much, yeah, with stuff that they shouldn't have, right?
Without saying, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Without telling anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you want to hit? I think that was a pretty good recap.
Yeah, I guess we're just normies.
Yeah, that's the conclusion here. Well, we'll be back in a few days with a recap of everything that happened this week. Have a good week, everybody. Stay warm out there. It's getting cold here in New York City. We'll be back in a few days. Thanks for tuning in. Till then, stay decent.
None of this was financial advice, legal advice, investment advice, or any other kind of advice. If you're looking for advice, you are definitely in the wrong place. Until next time, stay decent.